How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to 10 cars that you can get insured on as a 25-year-old. Now that's a very strange video title, but bear with me. I have recently turned 25 and I've been told all of my driving life that when you reach that age, suddenly your insurance quotes just drop pretty significantly, at least in the UK where I'm from. So I decided to look at a whole bunch of cars that I really like but probably can't afford, or at least most of them I can't afford, and see if this was true. As a 25-year-old, do I get cheaper quotes on a whole bunch of really sick cars? And I was massively surprised by how cheap some of the insurance quotes were, so I thought I'd make a video out of it, I guess. So it's not like my normal videos that are actually kind of aiming at a specific market. This is more just generally like if you're 25 and you're horrendously wealthy, then you could potentially drive these cars, but that's such a niche market. I just thought it was I just thought it was interesting, basically. Anyway, remember, I'm in the UK, so prices in other countries may differ, and remember that all of these cars are secondhand and very expensive when they were new, so probably expensive to look after and maintain. If this video gets 50,000 likes, which is genuinely just theoretically impossible with my videos, I will buy one of these 10 cars and insure myself on it just to prove the point. Insurance details are down below, they're literally just me basically. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Let's kickstart this video with a car that is entirely unaffordable for pretty much anyone, let alone a 25-year-old like myself. The second generation Lamborghini Gallardo LP560-4 with its 5.2 litre V10 engine, putting out 552 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds. Considering this is the biggest engine of any car on this video, sort of makes sense that it would have the most expensive quote at £1,059. Still pretty ridiculous for a 25-year-old when you think this was over £250,000 when released in 2008. It took up the baby Lambo position, just like the Huracan does today, with the second generation aiming to be a much better car than the first, with increased performance, lower fuel consumption and emissions, and arguably better looks, having been inspired by the Murcielago and the Reventon during design phases. A key way to tell the difference between a Gen 1 and a Gen 2 is by looking at the more aggressive front end, which actually looks more like the Reventon. These start at around £80,000, highly unaffordable for most 25-year-olds, and you're looking at sub 20,000 miles if you spend the full 100 grand limit for this video. Owners are generally very positive about reliability, that these aren't daily driver cars. Key things to watch for wear are brakes, clutches and tyres, and many owners complain about the plasticky interior too. E-gear is much better on the second gen Gallardo than the first though, which means if you prefer an auto you can drive with less anxiety. Next up, the slightly less ridiculous but no less sought after 981 Porsche Cayman GT4, which hosts a 3.8 litre flat 6 engine putting out 379 brake horsepower, which takes it from 0 to 60 in 4.3 seconds. The idea of the GT4 was to be a track-oriented version of the Cayman, and only came with a 6-speed manual, and a bunch of other features to increase downforce, most notably the fat wing at the back. Even despite its track prowess, I was able to get a quote on one at £1,057, which actually seems a bit steep when you compare it to the Lambo previously, but in isolation is pretty sick. Some other sick features this car has includes the reinforced chassis for stiffness and balance, and you can get in a Club Sport package that provides a half roll cage and 6-point harness amongst other track focused features. You could even go for the Sport Chrono package, which adds an extra ECU that sends telemetry to the driver's phone, which would be so sick on track days. These start at around £60,000 and go up to just under £80,000 for super low mileage examples, so potentially financeable for some very fortunate 25-year-olds. Reliability is very strong on these, with owners noting a few annoying things like a parking brake failure, squeaky clutch pedal, clunk in the rear suspension, and the fact that it absolutely eats through fuel and tyres, particularly on track. In 8th we have actually one of my girlfriend's favourite cars, the Jaguar F-Type S, specifically with the 3 litre supercharged V6, which puts out 374 brake horsepower and does 0 to 60 in 5.3 seconds. On insurance, one of these great sounding beasts would set a 25-year-old back £1,049. This has very much cemented itself as quite a classy British sports car, with the V6 being the middle engine in the lineup. Sadly, I couldn't get any decent quotes on any of the V8 engined F-Types for whatever reason, which does sound incredible due to its injection of fuel into the exhaust, but the V6 does still provide a strong middle ground, and owners suggest it handles slightly better due to being lighter overall. I've spoken about the F-Type in many previous vids, so I won't bang on about it, but a weird fact is that Lana Del Rey was the face of the marketing campaign for some rogue reason, and in 2013 there was literally a short film created called Desire to promote the car. These are listed for a minimum of around £30,000 and go up to just under £50,000 for very low mileage examples. The key issue some owners note is the supercharger snout being a weak point, and some have had issues with early onset rusting underneath, but other than that there haven't been too many reliability problems reported, which is a major positive. In 7th is a car that's already on its way to being a classic and one of my personal favourites, the Lotus Exige Series 2 S, which hosts a supercharged 1.8 litre inline 4, putting out 218 brake horsepower and managing 0 to 60 in 4.1 seconds. Where the Series 1 was made specifically as a result of a racing series, the Series 2 capitalised on the popularity and pushed on with a Toyota Yamaha collab engine attached to what was basically an Elise with a front splitter, fiberglass hardtop, rear engine cover and spoiler. All of these features are designed specifically to increase downforce, making this a serious track day specialist car. The S followed in 2006 with a supercharged Toyota engine instead, which made it even more nuts considering this car weighs around 914 kilograms. I was actually surprised at the insurance quote being so high on this given the size of the engine at £1,002, but for the performance you are still laughing. They're hard to come by, but you're looking at around £30,000 minimum for these in good condition, and you'll probably want to buy one from a specialist to be safe. Reliability from the engine is amazing in these, mostly because it's a Toyota, but experts note the transmission requires correct oils and potentially some upgrades if you plan on racing it, but as a daily or weekend warrior car, you're laughing. Back to another ridiculous car for a 25-year-old to get insured on. In 6th we have the Ferrari F430, which I managed to find an insurance quote on for £993, less than half of my annual insurance quote on my first car 7 years ago. The F430 hosts a 4.3 litre V8, putting out 483 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4 seconds. It was a successor to the 360 with some pretty clear exterior and performance differences between the two, and the predecessor to the 458, so sort of sits in that mid-tier of Ferrari cars. It was designed by Pininfarina, who collaborated with Frank Stevenson, who is responsible for other great cars like the MC12, Escort RS Cosworth and the McLaren P1. It was made to be more aerodynamic than the 360, mostly to increase downforce rather than to decrease drag, and it has the Enzo's tail lights and engine cover vents to match its hyper equivalent. This is actually a really interesting car, and I know someone who owns one, so maybe I can do a more in-depth video in the future. These start at around £60,000 and £100,000 will get you an incredibly low mileage example, but most of the models you'll find under £100,000 will have the F1 gearbox rather than the manual. DK Engineering have provided a pretty thorough explanation of the car's reliability and attest to the engine being very solid. The key thing is the clutches going on both manual and F1 shift cars, with the latter being worse for it. Ball joints and wishbones are also known to be a bit of a weak point, so worth taking that into account. But insured on a Ferrari at 25, I'd be gassed. If you're enjoying the video, make sure you hit the like button. I would really appreciate it. Remember, 50,000 likes and I'm buying one of these cars. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new to the channel. I post twice every week, and go follow me on Instagram at carswithjb, where I post every single day. Let's get back to the video. Out of interest, I wanted to see if the McLaren 12C would be a reasonable car on insurance, and I got a quote of £1,041. But I then thought I'd try the 650S, and that came in at £967, which is pretty insane for a car that does 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds thanks to its 3.8 litre twin turbocharged V8 that puts out 640 brake horsepower. The car was based on the 12C with 25% new parts, though the fundamentals are very similar. The carbon fibre reinforced polymer chassis and the engine, for example, are fundamentally the same, minus a bit more power. This was also designed by Frank Stevenson and was actually released by McLaren to combat the 12C's declining sales. My personal favourite thing about this car is the interior though, as McLarens tend to have very race focused cockpits. These start at around £85,000, and £100,000 will get you a Spider with under 20,000 miles on it in a nice spec. Owners note they're generally reliable, although a few lemons have also been known, with major electrical issues and warning lights. A trickle charger is key for anyone who's not planning on driving their 650S too often, as I've heard the restarting process is quite challenging. But if I had one, I know I'd be driving it as much as possible. In 4th we have one of the best sounding V8s to ever leave the British Isles in my opinion, the Aston Martin Vantage, which puts out 420 brake horsepower from its 4.7 litre V8, taking it from 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds. Despite those insane specs, I managed to get a quote at just £960. The 4.7 litre engine came with the 2008 update, and that also gave the car stiffened suspension and Bilstein dampers, transmission updates, and of course aesthetic changes to both the exterior and interior. The Vantage wasn't ever a Bond car, which is a shame as a massive Bond fan, but that doesn't really matter as it's still a car that achieved DB9 fridge status on Top Gear and is pretty special due to how many were produced, matched only by the DB9. These start at around £34,000 for an early 2009 example, and for a much more recent 2019 model we'll be looking at around £90,000. The quote I got was on a 2014 example, just for your reference. Experts note that this car can be surprisingly affordable to live with as long as it's looked after correctly, but when things do go wrong they can be very expensive, with the aircon issues being a particularly annoying and costly issue. Best bet is to get an extended warranty with one, which is around £2,000 annually from Aston Martin. On to the top 3 now, and in third we have a car I've managed to completely fall in love with this year, the magnificent Alfa Romeo 4C with its 1.75 litre turbocharged inline 4, putting out 236 brake horsepower, which takes from 0 to 60 in 4.4 seconds. Anyone who's been watching the channel for a while knows this is a car I'm potentially looking at owning in the next year or so, depending on financial situation, so please do like the video and subscribe to sort me out. Insurance came in at just £817, which is very reasonable considering the performance. It weighs just 895 kilograms and was built with tech and materials from the 8C. Having driven one, I can confirm it is a bit twitchy because it is like a little square on wheels, but the road feel you get is so exceptional and it really does pull. The gearbox shifts quickly enough, and the only real problems I have with it are it could sound better, it's a bit cheap on the interior, and literally everyone looks here, so if you get bored of people staring at you all the time, then this is probably not the car for you. I actually found it quite fun, everyone staring at the car whilst I was driving it, but I can imagine it getting a little bit annoying if everyone's always looking at you. I'll link in the description to my review of this car, it's well worth a watch if you really like the 4C. Prices have very much stagnated at around £35,000 to £40,000 for a decent example, and 45 grand is about the max you'll pay. Early models were known to have some transmission issues which have mostly now been sorted, and some of the interior leather has been known to bubble, but other than that problems have been relatively isolated, which is good considering it is an Alfa. On to another future classic, the first generation Audi R8 with the 4.2 litre V8 putting out 423 brake horsepower, which takes it from 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. My favourite thing about this car is the fact that you get it with a gated manual gearbox, which is ridiculous when you think I got a quote on one at £788. I even got a quote on a more recent R8 V10 Plus at £1,020 as an FYI, which is even more insane, but obviously also more expensive. I've spoken about this car at length in previous videos, so again won't bang on about it for too long. Instead I'll make the case for it being a future classic. As the first of its kind and a somewhat iconic shape, and an almost universally loved car with mental engine options, a gated manual gearbox, just watch in like 20 to 30 years people will be looking back on it as an absolute gem. I'll be 45 to 55 by then saying I told you so. These start at just under £30,000 for a high mileage example and go all the way up to £60,000 for one with less than 15,000 miles. They're generally renowned to be bulletproof on the engine front, although of course as a VW it has been known to have ignition coil issues and some wishbone failures too. The oldest examples are known to have issues with frame cracking above the front, so something to be very aware of, but like some of the other cars, if it has less than 100,000 miles you can get Audi's extended 12-month warranty on it. A rogue one taking the top spot with a ridiculous insurance quote, the track-focused beast that is the noble M12 GT03, which I managed to get a quote on at just £666, around the same I pay for my modified MX-5. It has a 3 litre twin turbocharged Ford V6 engine, also known for its application in the Mondeo, putting out 340 brake horsepower, taking the car from 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. These are listed for around the £40,000 mark, and it's important to remember when looking for one of these that they are probably used on track to some degree, so a thorough inspection might be well worth it. Some owners note it handles like a larger Elise, but still has mad supercar-esque performance, at least for its time considering it was released in 2000. The M12 was envisioned by a man named Lee Noble, and is very much as basic as it needs to be to get you going fast. The problem with this is that the car wasn't known for being particularly high quality. Many parts have been known to break, and some owners say it feels a bit kit car-y, so it's very much a car for enthusiasts who might be willing to dig through the nonsense to get through to the stunning performance hidden beneath. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe as well if you're new, and hit the notification bell too to stay up to date on when I post my 2 videos every single week. Massive thank you to the patrons as always, and to you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.